is Totally 80s, the podcast dedicated to the music of the greatest decade ever. So, turn up your Walkman, loosen that scrunchie, and get ready to talk 80s with your host, Lyndsey Parker.
Hi, I'm Lyndsey Parker from Yahoo Entertainment, and welcome to another episode of Totally 80s. We love hearing from you, so why not take a second to follow us at Totally 80s on Facebook and Instagram, or email us your comments and show ideas to podcast@totally80s.com. So today's subject on Totally 80s is teen idols. We are going to go back to a magical time when electric youth was in the air, a time when, seemingly out of the blue, a bunch of young, fresh faces took over the airwaves. And I think you guys can all figure out where I'm going with this. I cannot think of a better guest to join us for this topic than the woman who, I can't believe it was 35 years ago, set the record that she still holds to this day as the youngest artist to write, produce, and perform a Billboard Hot 100 #1 single, which is a feat she accomplished at the tender age of 17 with Foolish Beat. Her career is as vibrant as ever. She recently released her first pop album in 20 years, The Body Remembers. And man, my body sure remembers a lot of awesome stuff from that time that this woman and her peers accomplished in the 1980s. So without further ado, please welcome to Totally 80s, the queen of the teens, the queen of the scene, Debbie Gibson.
Hi, I love that. The queen of the scene.
And yeah, you really were. And I mean, your name has come up on the show before. You Instagram or tweeted about this when we did the best songwriters of the 80s panel, which was with two modern day hit makers, Sam Hollander and Justin Tranter, who write songs for Panic at the Disco and Selena Gomez and Justin Bieber and everybody. I asked them who were their songwriting idols when they were first, considering that career. And they both invoked your name. They both mentioned you as someone, and I know you and Sam.
I heard it. I saw it. I was like floored because, and you and I have talked about this, it's like people have different perceptions of me, and sometimes I get my props and sometimes I don't. And I've learned to not care about that. So when I do get props like that from people I love and respect, because I live in a modern music world, I know and love their songs. And I that was really meaningful to me.
Wow. I know that you guys kind of connected, you and Sam, recently. You had lunch or something. So I
had lunch in Vegas. It was amazing. We were both fangirling.
I feel like Totally 80s sort of put that together, a little bit of a matchmaker situation. So I'm proud to have been able to do that. So let's set the scene. As I was talking about when you were coming up with Foolish Beat, with Out of the Blue, with Electric Youth, which is about to turn 35. You were a teen, and the people I just mentioned were teens. So I kind of feel like you and some of the names I just mentioned kind of set the template for what totally happened later in the 90s and the aughts with TRL and Britney and Christina Aguilera and, of course, Backstreet Boys and stuff, like of having teens listening to music by artists their own age. Like that, we take that for granted now. Now it's all about Billie Eilish. It's about Olivia Rodrigo. Do you feel like, you kind of change the game in that way?
I mean, here's what's so interesting. I recently saw, the it was an honor bestowed on Taylor Swift by Phoebe Bridgers. And she was saying like a young girl just simply writing about her life and where she was, speaking of Taylor, was kind of revolutionary at that time. And I do think, every generation has their teen idols. And look, before me, we had Carole King and we had Carly Simon and all these amazing female singer-songwriters that were very young. Leslie Gore, who was not known for writing, but I remember being on the couch on Good Morning America with Leslie Gore going, holy crap, this is Leslie Gore. You're Leslie Gore. Like you did It's My Party. I can't. And I always had a sense of that history. I never think, I did this first. I always who came before me. You look at the Osmonds, and again, it's we're talking idols today, not necessarily songwriters. And so, I think that every generation oils the machine for the next.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, and I do think that it's kind of like the gears get going, and then at some point it drops off, and there are no teens again. There's a backlash inevitably, but I do think now there's not going to be a backlash. I think it's like, teens are artists, whether they're teens, whether they're 50, I think it's a little bit more ageless now, which is great news on all ends of the age spectrum.
Yeah.
I do think back then it was, there was a unique resurgence. And here's what's interesting. It's like, I was always going to be me and be trying for that record deal. And Tiffany was simultaneously doing it, and New Kids was simultaneously doing it. So it was like the universe just went, it's Teen Idol time, everybody. And we all emerged, but we all had a very different and difficult road to getting heard, getting respected. I don't know if we quite ever fully got respected. I mean, we've talked about, I've never won a Grammy. I was never even nominated for Grammy.
I mean, I think you have, and I definitely want to get into a little bit more about that perception change. But yeah, it is surprising. I mean, the first time I ever interviewed you was at the Grammy Museum, where it was a sold out house of admirers, and, you were being honored for your career. But you're right. You did not ever get nominated for Grammy. I'm pretty sure New Kids have not. New Edition, I don't even think have. Maybe I have to double.
I mean, but we were pretty much like discounted. We were not in the real music world, even though we were selling more like, the ASCAP Songwriter of the Year award was based solely on who got the most airplay that year and who sold the most records. And I tied with Springsteen year that I won. Yeah. And so I always got the people spoke, my manager even now says, she goes, you're like the people's pop princess. You're not, I was never the critics' darling or the award show darling.
Well, you're our darling. You're totally 80s darling. And I do want to argue that I think at this point, just if for no other reason, the staying power of yourself, of New Kids on the Block, who when they do the mixtape tour, which you did in 2019 with them, it's like literally one of the biggest tours of the year.
Yes, they sell over 500,000 tickets every other year. I mean, name me an act that does that consistently. When they made their resurgence with that album they did with Dirty Dancing and Sexify My Love and all those great songs, they were back, and they reinvented themselves and created a place for themselves in the touring landscape. And they had such staying power.
Also, I do think there's a loyalty, because I was talking about how, some of the quote unquote teen idols of the 80s that I looked up to were not teens themselves. So it was kind of aspirational, but let's face it, like the guys at Duran Duran were not going to date my, me as a middle schooler or whatever. I was not going to hang out with them, be friends with them. But people, when you're people like yourself, like New Kids, like Tiffany, like the Jets, like Menudo, we'll talk about all these artists. There's maybe a different connection.
Shanice. Yeah, I was in school with all of them backstage at like Solid Gold and Bandstand. Like that's how I met.
Really?
Artists.
Well, hold on. Let me hold my thought for a second, because I need to get a visual of what it was like to be going to Solid Gold school.
Yeah, so it was like the 2 hours or whatever. You had to sit in this classroom with a teacher backstage on the day you're filming Solid Gold. But I remember in particular, like me and the Jets had a day together. And then we performed together again like 5 years ago or something. And again, like amazing. They're out there doing their thing. It was amazing. And we were all fans of each other. So Glenn Medeiros, Nothing's Gonna Change My Love. I mean,
his daughter's on American Idol right now, Lyric Medeiros. She just auditioned. That. Actually, since we're talking about TV shows, I just mentioned American Idol. I want to know if you ever went on or considered going on what I consider to be the original American Idol, which was Star Search, which ran from 1980 to 1995. I'm sorry, because let me just rattle off real quick a list of people, all teen idols, who between 1983 and 1995 went on this show. I don't think any of these people actually won, but they won at life because they ended up having big careers. Some of them. Tiffany was on it, Britney Spears, Justin Timberlake, Alanis Morissette, who actually started off as a teen idol in Canada. A lot of people don't really know that. Aaliyah, Christina Aguilera, Usher, Leanne Rimes, the Backstreet Boys, Destiny's Child, who were called something else at the time, and they lost to a band called Skeleton Crew. And how I know this knowledge, why this is in my head, I don't know. But it's there.
True.
Shanice, you mentioned Shanice just now. Shanice went on it as a kid. Pitbull went on it. Like this was the school. This was the team school right here.
You're gonna love my story so much. I'm overlapping you with enthusiasm.
No, I love it.
And by the way, underdogs out there, you're gonna love my story. I auditioned for Star Search quite literally 10 times and didn't get on.
Holy cow. Are you serious?
I auditioned with covers. I remember doing Where the Boys Are. I remember I did my songs. I did Only in My Dreams before it ever came out. I was told my songs would never be hits. I was told my voice was too this or that or not, whatever all the things were. I did not even get onto the show. That's and I crazy. Remember, it's crazy, but here's the thing I love about that. And we talked when I did Masked Singer, and I talked about how like my voice always freaks me out with how quirky it can sound at times. But that's the thing. Like I always was I think like a quirkier artist. And I remember Gwen Stefani saying like, if she was on The Voice as a contestant, she didn't think she'd get through. Like there are certain artists that are about their tone and about their vibe and about their songwriting, but not necessarily like the slickest, contest-winning vocalist.
This is like some of my favorite artists and singers of the 80s. Let's face it, and I mean this with no shade, but like Robert Smith wouldn't get on The Voice. Richard Butler from the Psychedelic Furs. Simon Le Bon probably wouldn't. Like Madonna, I would not. Cyndi Lauper, a great singer, but definitely a very certain vibe. Like probably wouldn't get on.
Vibe. Well, that's what I was about to say. People who are a vibe aren't necessarily that competition winning. And my nerves always get me like, and again, listen, I've learned to accept they make my performances interesting because I'm an adrenaline girl. Like my adrenaline's not always my friend. So some people have incredible control. That was me for like a period of time in a bubble when I did a lot of Broadway, and I lived and breathed for having that control and hitting those notes. But it's not sustainable if you want to have any semblance of a life. And at a certain point I went, I'm going to lean into what's unique about me as an artist and not worry about being that slick vocalist, because that's not what I was put on this earth to do. Well, there's people who do it better, like the 15 artists you just named.
Well, no, obviously leaning into your specific vibe and what you do best worked out for you in the 80s. It's worked out for you since. But you talked about how you and your peers had so many obstacles to overcome to get to where you are now. And apparently one of them was that these people at Star Search were idiots. And that was one thing. But, all artists, including yourself, face a lot of rejection. So what of the obstacles I want to talk to you about is I mentioned that now, and you did as well, that it's very par for the course. It's almost required now to be young, to be a star right now. Billie Eilish had won, made history as the only woman who's ever won all four of the big four categories in the Grammys. Mm-hmm. In fact, only one other artist ever did that, and that was in 1980. That was Christopher Cross, and then Billie Eilish did it.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he held that record for like 40 years. But, I mentioned Billie Eilish, of course, she's the obvious one. We've talked about Taylor Swift just now, and she was a teenager when she started. Obviously, Olivia Rodrigo, Justin Bieber was a teenager when he started. Now it's kind of like very commonplace. And all of the labels, the promotional machines will hype up the fact like this person's only 15, they're only 17, they're only 13. But my understanding is that was not considered really a selling point at least for you. When you came up, they were trying to like make you seem older, like you were 25, 17 going on 25. What was up with that?
Yeah, I mean, my pouty cover of Only in My Dreams, I think I look 40. Like, I feel like something about my energy is like, because they were sneaking me into clubs to perform. My mom was crazy enough to sneak me in, and nobody was asking my age. Nobody cared, but it was absolutely a detriment and not a selling point. The labels were like, what do we do with a 15-year-old girl? What do we do with a 16-year-old girl? And
did they not realize, sorry to interrupt, but did they not realize the relatability? Because a kind of half-finished thought I had was that you can aspire to want to be friends with Duran Duran or, Madonna, people in their 20s when you're a kid. And that's it. They seem far away and unattainable. But you could imagine as a kid hanging out with Debbie Gibson, who's around the same age as you, dating Joey McIntyre, who's around the same age as you. It's like, didn't the record labels realize that playing up the fact that you were the same age as your potential fans is marketing gold, really? What I mean?
The fans eventually let the labels know that and kind of guided them. But like at the time, it was still a very male older male dominated world, even in terms of like, if there was a young girl, it was older men writing their songs. They were like, what do you mean you can write your own songs, kid, girl? So we did have to break that ground. It seems insane now, but they just simply didn't understand the world.
Can we talk a little bit about your fashion? I think when you say you looked 40 in that picture, it was really just because of the hair. But once you obviously took some ownership of your teen image, as you know, you proved that you were very successful. Like, I got to talk about the hat. You're wearing a hat today. It's not the hat.
No, but I've always been a hat girl. Like from the time I actually took a toilet paper roll like as a 2-year-old and put it on my head and made it a hat. That's how obsessed hats I've always been.
That's adorable.
Man, it's my vibe. I feel most like me when I have a hat on.
What about the jean jacket thing? I mean, a lot of people associate that with Tiffany. That was kind of her signature accessory. And definitely
I think all of us teenage girls had a denim jacket. So, but yeah, she was a little more, and she'd tell you this too if she was here, because she and I are great friends. We were kind of like the cousins who were opposites. So she was a little bit more like, downplay the theatrical image and jean jacket and kind of her rocker red hair. And I mean, her voice, by the way. I just have to take a moment to say, Tiffany's voice is unfreaking believable. Was then, it is now. I listened to Could Have Been the other day in my bedroom, like at night, like you do when you're a teenager. And I was like, get it, girl. Like, oh my God. I mean, she is such a naturally gifted vocalist, so powerful. And at that age, even like to have that, I always, you always want what you can't have. My voice was always that pristine, bell-like, belty voice. And she had this texture that like Bonnie Raitt has. She has this texture that you're born with. And I was like, how do I get that? Like, that's so cool. Her voice is so rich and thick, and it still is. And she's out there doing her thing. And she had a harder road than I did in the beginning, because I had my mom. And she had a male manager who was, notoriously Svengali-like. And for a young girl, that's a lot.
I'm not surprised at all, but maybe some people would be happy and unsurprised to hear you speak so highly of her. We all know that there was no rivalry there, but the press tends to play this up. And they tend to, yes, there are some male rivalries, Beatles versus Stones. There's a lot in hip hop, Tupac, but it seems like pitting women against each other, whether in the 90s and 2000s, it was Britney versus Christina. In the 80s, people would compare Madonna and Cyndi Lauper as if like those two couldn't occupy. And that was a big thing with you guys. And you talk about the opposites thing. I remember people would pick camps like Team Debbie or Team Tiffany, and they'd be like, well, yeah, Tiffany, she could really, she got this really big power voice, but she didn't write her own songs or play instruments. And Debbie does. But, it's dumb. And I guess it's a lazy journalism thing to be like, hey, here are two women around the same age.
I used to defend her when people would say, well, she doesn't write her own songs. And I'm like, yeah, but neither does Whitney Houston. Does anyone ever bring that up? No, because some people are vocalists first. And I've always said, like, I'm a songwriter first, vocalist second. Like, that's just the way the universe made me. I don't know. It's a great marriage when you find the great songs and the great vocalist and they come together, and who cares? Like, does anyone ever stop and think when they're listening to Elton, well, he didn't write the lyrics? Like, I don't. That's an Elton John song. Yes, I know Bernie wrote it, but it's like he's now embodying it and bringing it into the world. So I was always like, shut up to that. And you use the word occupy. Yes. Why can't multiple artists occupy the same space? There's a different number one song every single week. There's 100 songs on the charts every day. There's plenty of room for everybody, So I used to have the Walkman with the split headphones, and me and my younger sister, Denise, used to listen to I Think We're Alone Now every time we were on an airplane taking off, because it was like, right? It's very cinematic. So like, we were fans. I was a fan, and she says that to me too. And her sister had my poster on her wall. And so it was all very supportive. And still is.
Amazing. So would there ever be a chance, though, that the two of you would collaborate musically? I know were you on the mixtape tour together with New Kids?
Yeah, we were. We were. I mean, there weren't many. The only duet that happened was me and Joey Mack. So we didn't, she and I didn't collaborate, but I wouldn't rule that out. I wouldn't, I'm open to everything. I mean, I think she and I are musically quite different. I almost like, I wonder what it would be like if like she wrote me a song and I wrote her a song. Like, hey, this is my vision for you. And she went, this is my vision for you. Like, I think that would be kind of interesting because I actually I do have a vision for her in the kind of country pop. Again, I go Bonnie Raitt in my head. I go Winona. I go like, there's some women that just like their power and there's a melodic sensibility. And so that could be interesting. You never know.
But more seriously, I'd love to see that thing you just proposed happen. I don't think a lot of people know that Tiffany actually started off as a country singer before she made the move to be like the queen of the malls, the mall pop thing. So I would love to see that. It'd be a sort of return to her roots in more ways than one. But you mentioned Joey McIntyre. You did do a duet with him on the mixtape tour. He also is on your album doing Lost in Your Eyes ballad duet remake on The Body Remembers. And he also, you did a residency together in Vegas.
We did. It was such a blast. I want to do it again. He knows that. So it's being thrown around. So we'll see if that could happen. I would love that. He and I on stage together. It's the connection through music that people have on a stage. It's very powerful. It's why there are so many showmances in theater. But like that connection, because we have like you talked about, our individual history. Like not many people have walked that teen pop icon, whatever you want to call us, path at that time, starting at that age. And so there's just this like understanding of that and each other that we have. And to play that out on stage in front of the audience was really magical.
That's so cool. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about New Kids and in a broader thing as well as New Edition, because, we were talking about how Tiffany covered Tommy James and she also covered the Beatles. Obviously, she had a big hit with I Saw Him Standing There. You come from a school of, loving people like Leslie Gore and Carole King. And then, Maurice Starr, who put together New Edition and then kind of put together and Joey I'm using Joey McIntyre's words from an interview I did. Maurice wanted to make Lightning Strike Again with kind of like a white version of New Edition. They completely descend from a tradition of Motown, Jackson 5, the Temptations, the Miracles, doo-wop, Boys to Men as well. I don't think they were teens when they came up, but they were pretty young.
The Four Seasons and all of these groups. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I don't think that or some of the things you've name checked, or even Tiffany, who obviously was in the 80s, probably introducing a lot of young people to Tommy James. I will fully admit that I did not know I Think We're Alone Now before I heard her sing it. I completely found out about who Tommy James was through her and also through Joan Jett and Billy Idol. The Beatles I knew, but a lot of people I don't think give credit for the fact that the teen idols of the 80s were part of a larger tradition, and certainly the boy bands were part of a tradition.
They were meant to be here and in the landscape for sure. I live in Vegas. All those groups you just named, it's like I feel like I still see the Temptations on a billboard every now and again. Again, I don't know which members are in there anymore, but look, girls need their boy bands. Girls need their teen idol girls. They always have. They always will. They need their Sean Cassidys and all of it. Snobby people in the music world, it's always going to be cynical about those acts. And I am glad that feels like it's changed or is changing.
It has.
That's the thing. People are like, they're not as fixated on age. Again, like Olivia Rodrigo, she's just a great artist. I don't care how old she is. And if an adult's going to be snobby about her music, in my opinion, well, then they're missing out. They're missing out on experiencing a great album. And I always felt like that, but it's hard when you're the artist to say that to people.
Especially when you're that young. I mean, you obviously were pretty headstrong for your age, in terms of being able to get your way with all the record labels who probably doubted whether they should entrust you to write and produce and record your own material at such a young age. So you maybe were a little more confident than some other artists your age, but at the same time, you don't want to be branded in the press when you're talking to Tiger Beat or whoever you'd be doing an interview with that you're. Nowadays, it would be great, if Billie Eilish or whoever does an interview talking about how she's taken a stand against misogyny or whatever, and we'll be like, you go, Billie Eilish, that's great. Little bit different then, I would imagine, especially, you know, I don't know. You tell me. You were there.
No, it's true. And even now, like, again, that's why, you know, when Sam and Justin sang my praises, I was like, thank you. Because I can't come out and go, I did that first. Like that does not feel good. That doesn't look good perception wise. I already know. I sit back and in a place of confidence and empowerment and with perspective, because I know what I did. I did it. I was there.
Like I said, you're part of a larger tradition.
But again, the beauty of now is, like, with TikTok, I could have a song off the Body Remembers that in a month or a year or 5 years goes viral for some crazy reason that I have nothing to do with. If I just kind of keep things going and stay in the game, and then suddenly you're back, you're the story, and I always look at the examples, you know, I always bring up Tina Turner playing stadiums at 50.
Kate Bush. Get one of your songs in Stranger Things. Look at Kate Bush. She had like one of the biggest songs of 20.
I know. But again, you could be working on that and that doesn't work. Somebody has to have the idea and reach out and license the song and all the stuff. So I always just go, universe, yes, let that happen. That would be amazing. And you know, me and my team are proactive, but you can't force a viral moment, and you can force that to happen with a song on a soundtrack or in a modern current show. But it happens, is my point. So I think if you just, you know, I'm the anything is possible girl.
Well, let me, since we're sort of talking about things on screen, just take a little random detour for a second. When I was doing research for this podcast, and, you know, if you Google 80s teen idols, a lot of the people that come up actually aren't music. Because, I mean, if you're actually talking about people who were teens at the time, a lot of the people that were on the cover in the 80s of magazines like 16, Tiger Beat, Young Miss, or YM or whatever are actors. Can we just talk for a second? Because speaking of anniversaries, this year is the 40th anniversary of the movie The Outsiders. And my mind still boggles and my body still remembers that all of these people were in the same movie. All these people were in the same movie, people. C. Thomas Howell, Ralph Macchio, this is before Karate Kid, Matt Dillon, Patrick Swayze, rest in peace, and this is before Dirty Dancing, Rob Lowe, one of the kings of the Brat Pack, Emilio Estevez, and I'd love to get into some John Hughes talk for a minute, because one of my teen idols was Molly Ringwald. Tom Cruise, Diane Lane, who I adore. I
love her. Yes.
She was amazing in Ladies and Gentlemen, The Fabulous Stains, and in Streets of Fire. Leif Garrett had a small part, 70s teen idol, and not an 80s teen idol, but fun fact, Tom Waits had a small part in that film as well. So all of these people, and this was all kind of early in their careers, they all went on to become like the biggest Brat Pack teen movie kings and princes of the era. They were all in the same movie together. And then, like I said, there were all the John Hughes movies.
I want to know who that casting director was, because whoever that casting director was had some foresight.
But a lot of the stuff that was happening in music with kind of, as I was saying, trying to lay out the argument of a youth quake that we're still feeling to this day. The John Hughes Brat Pack era absolutely did. With soundtracks, I mean, you know, now it's kind of par for the course that if a Twilight movie comes out or whatever, that there's going to be an epic soundtrack with hit makers of the day. But that kind of started with the John Hughes movies. But like Emilio Estevez, Rob Lowe, who wasn't in any, I don't think, the John Hughes movies, but he was in St. Elmo's Fire. I mean, Judd Nelson. But Molly Ringwald was very important. She, unlike some of the people I mentioned who were playing teenagers that actually weren't teenagers, again, a lot of times we were looking up to people older than us. Molly Ringwald actually was a teenager when she was in 16 Candles. I think she was about 16. And she was a regular girl. And I wanted to, I mean, meaning that she looked like someone that could be your friend, that, you know, and I wanted all of the Pretty in Pink clothes, still do, to be honest.
Molly Ringwald had that accessibility and she had that quirkiness. And like, I always loved her too. I mean, and she had that like punk spirit, you know, she had that like nonconformist thing that, you know, you obviously had in you, I had in me.
The most crushing part of Pretty in Pink is Iona's make under. Like, what the hell? She probably wasn't Iona being the woman played by Annie Potts, who runs the record stores, who's Andy's boss. is like, I wanted to be like her when I grew up. It's like, okay, she probably wasn't that old, but she's supposed to be a woman like in her 30s probably. And she like runs a record store and that's her job. That's cool. And she like wears all this cool thrift store stuff and she just looks awesome and she's quirky and weird. And the message, there was a very reductive message in that film and also with Ali Sheedy's makeover in The Breakfast Club, where like a woman should A, aspire to get a guy, B, aspire to get a guy who's kind of like a normal guy, and that normal guy will only like her when she looks quote unquote normal herself. So at the end of that, when Annie Potts looks like basically, you know, a real estate agent,
a housewife, yeah,
and she gets the doctor as a result, and she's happier. Why couldn't the message have been like, it's fine if she wants to, you know, date a doctor if she's no longer like, hey, me dating these like rock star or starving artist types is not working out. I want a stable guy.
Totally listen. I know it's back a decade, but like it's also like Grease, dress like a slut and get the guy. I mean, there's a lot of these messages in these movies that definitely need an update.
It's always really gotten me mad that if an artist, regardless of the genre they're at or what age the artist is, if their fan base is primarily young girls, teen girls, female fan base, they are taken less seriously. This has happened to rock bands like even Def Leppard or whatever, like, oh, girls like them, so they are not as credible as Slayer or some other hard rock band. And pretty much every boy band, every Justin Bieber, every teen idol, if they have, even Billie Eilish when she first started out, if the fan base is young, Duran, they really got this really hard. Duran, it took them decades. They are respected out there in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It took them decades to get the kind of respect because when they were at their commercial peak in the 80s, their fans were 12-year-old girls. Teen girls just need to be hired to do A&R. Who were the first people that liked the Beatles?
Totally. Yes, and girls turn to women who will follow you to the ends of the earth. I mean, I have straight males, I have gay males, I have straight females, I have gay females, and all the colors of the rainbow in between. But I do have a lot of women that have been with me from the beginning. And listen, who do you think is packing the New Kids cruises? It's 99% women, grown women who are vital and vibrant and never forgot. It's my title, The Body Remembers. I mean, women do not forget singing into their hairbrush in their bedroom. They don't forget what song was playing when their person asked them to the prom. They don't.
They're very loyal. They're very loyal. If I've gone to a Hanson concert, I see the now grown women, probably in around their 30s, who were listening to MMMBop. If I go see Harry Styles, I see women in their mid 20s who loved One Direction when That's What Makes You Beautiful comes out. Female fans are very loyal. And as I was just saying, they're very ahead of the curve. I mean, it is a full-on fact that when the Beatles first came out, that, you know, look at Beatlemania, look at the people that were waiting at JFK with signs for them when the Beatles landed. Look who was in the audience at Ed Sullivan. Look at Elvis Presley's career and who was
those women still scream and they still weep. I always say when I was doing Lost in Your Eyes with Joey McIntyre on the mixtape tour, grown women were weeping. I mean, there is something visceral about their connection to music, our connection to music and each other. And I do think we live in a time, thankfully, that women really do lift each other up. I know it sounds cliche, but it's true. I think women are more kind of open about how connected they are to other women these days. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't know what sense it made to anyone when Atlantic was signing me, when it was like, before they signed me, when it was like, great, what hit male songwriter are we going to get to write your songs? And it was like, things that made, I'm like, but no. I mean, I literally had to say out loud, but no, I'm a young girl writing for other young people and expressing what they feel like.
Who better to write about the kind of music that will click with one of the biggest record buying and most loyal record buying demographics of the population, teenage girls, than a teenage girl herself. Like, you walk the walk, you talk the talk, but it's just very weird to me. Like, it's always stuck with me. A few years ago, I interviewed Davey Havok from AFI, who that band, you know, they were a big, you know, band of the emo pop punk era of the aughts. And they got big, like about 4 or 5 albums in. And he remembers that as they were about to break, as AFI were about to go huge and be all over MTV, their audience used to be, because they came from a punk background up in Northern California, used to be mostly dudes, skate punk kind of dudes. And when he started seeing their audience become more and more female, like about 50-50, he's like, we're doing something right. He's basically like, I'm quoting him. He said something like, if girls are liking your music, you are doing something right, because they have good taste. And I agree. I think, record labels should just hire, look at BTS, like literally the biggest pop band on the planet. It's all women. It's all young girls, little girls who did that. And I also think a lot of whatever decade you come up in, your teen idol is your gateway drug. And I actually just wanted to do another real quick aside, because I like this anecdote as well. Many years ago, CeCe DeVille of Poison was doing an interview at my work. I wasn't doing the interview myself, but the person who was basically asked CeCe DeVille, what did he think of that kind of trend in music? And probably was expecting CeCe to shit all over and be like, oh, it's not rock. They don't play their instruments, whatever. And he absolutely did not. Pretty eloquently said, even if this isn't the kind of music I like personally, he's like, this is the gateway. He's like, there are kids who are going, like, Backstreet Boys will be the first band they ever like. It'll be the first album they buy. It'll be the first concert they go to. And it will start a lifelong love affair with music. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what, like when you're saying that, like, girls remember their first prom song or whatever. So I'm kind of rambling, but I'm just wondering, why do you think it is that even with all this evidence that we've just laid out, that there are so many music snobs that think if an audience is more than 50% or is mostly young women, instead of them thinking like, oh, wow, this artist is on something.
I just think people feel like they have to justify their jobs, and people are fear-based in that way. And I do think that, like, because nobody can, it's what I was saying about, like, I can't create a viral moment, right? Like, you can't be contrived and pure at the same time, right? You can't strategize on how to have a hit. Like, there's nothing more magical like than that time for me when I was writing those songs and I wasn't paying rent. I was living in my parents' house. So like what I was doing was so pure. It was such a pure expression. And then it was such a pure connection to the audience, especially with those songs I produced or co-produced, or even my producer at the time, Fred Czar, would take what I played on my demos and basically like, let me preserve everything magical about that arrangement you came up with and just enhance the sounds, because he knew that it was connected. Like we were saying earlier, it's like, I had the posters on, I had Michael Jackson on my wall and George Michael on my wall and New Kids on my wall. I was and Madonna on my wall, and I was copying Madonna's like borderline her da 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 every time I'm telling secrets. I was copying her vocal inflections and like I was in it. So those grown men knew they couldn't touch that connection I had with my audience. They knew, but they were afraid they were going to be out of a job. See, my thing now, like with the Body Remembers album, as you know, I work with Sean Thomas, who's now 21. I started working with him when he was 14.
Oh, wow.
Hire people younger and better than you to help you execute your vision, in my opinion. Like, I'm always going to be with my melodic sensibility and my lyrics and my connection to my audience now. But if I want to sonically be in the mix of what's modern and current, I am going to collaborate with people who are in the thick of that in a way that I'm not. So, yeah, I mean, I am in it, like, in that I listen to current music, but I love that, like, again, sonically, I'm not still locked in my bedroom on my recorder doing the tech side. So I admit that, like, I've moved away from that. So I'm going to find that person who was like me now to work with and not be afraid of that.
Well, let's bring it on home with the current time, because we sort of, right at the beginning of this conversation, you were speculating about whether you and your peers have gotten the critical respect that maybe you didn't get then. I see the tides turning critically, but also just nostalgically. And I would love from you, as someone who's been playing to audiences, both the loyal audiences you grew up with and also new people, like, you must see it. You must see this happening.
I totally see it. I want to comment on two parts of what you said. So first of all, yes, like I said, I get respect from people who like really know music and know the history, like Sam and Justin. But then there are like award shows and things that like they'll invite me to do the red carpet. And I'm like, listen, I'm going to sit home and watch it on TV until you decide there's some special acknowledgement for me. And if you don't, that's okay. But like, I don't quite know where I fit into the landscape sometimes, or where like if I show up on a red carpet, like I'm probably never getting that acknowledgement, right? Because I walk this weird line. I've always fallen between a lot of cracks. I did between Broadway and pop, and I do between like people see me up here, or they see me down there, or they're offering me roles, or I have to audition, or I wake up every day and I'm like, ooh, which me is going to be like targeted to? I have no idea. How are people going to perceive me today in my business world? I have no idea day to day, literally. So I have to keep my own, like, what's good for me? What rooms do I feel good in? What places do I feel good in? If I, like me not being everywhere on every red carpet allows me to stay home and rest and write and further my actual craft. And so we live in a world right now where so much is from the outside in and perception, that I have to remind myself to go back to the well and to go inward and not to care about all that stuff. And not to think like, oh, am I supposed to schmooze these people to get this accolade to do that? So I just step back a lot from all of that. So that's just one part. And to talk about nostalgia, what I call nostalgia.
Nostalgia. I love that. I love that. I might borrow that from you.
I can't take credit for it. Allowing Nicole, who I was working on a TV pitch project with. Thank you, Nicole, for nostalgia. I always give her credit. But I love it. Because it is like current to be nostalgic now. That's what's so interesting, right? It's cool again. And I do think it definitely is because, we live in a world where we wake up and there's a mass shooting on TV, and there's people turning against drag queens, and there's a lot of icky stuff in the world, and we would like to time travel in a way. Not really, I don't want to time travel in the sense like I don't think everything great was done in the past, but we want to time travel and grab the pure innocent. Like it literally wells me up with tears, because we want our world to be more innocent, and we want to take the purity from that time and from that music before vocals were tuned and before, we want those pure melodies, and we want that pure relationship with those artists. Like it just harkens back to that time. And I think it stirs a very deep connected feeling. And that's why, like when Joey and I played Vegas and people came to see us and they were like, that's my idol and my crush together on the stage. Like, that's powerful. That's powerful. That should not be categorized in any trite way. Like, oh, these teen acts, these former, whatever. No, it's a powerful connection, and it's a resonance that we all, in a frequency we want now. We need now to sustain in this very chaotic, troubled world. So that's why I think people are gravitating to these artists. And I also think a lot, like I've said throughout this amazing conversation that I'm so glad we're having, is that so many people of our era have sustained. Yes. And they're thriving, right? So like, it's not, oh, look at new kids in their, baggy clothes and hiding their dad bods and whatever. No, they're out to play. They're out to compete. They're top of their game. We all want that inspiration. We all want that aspiration. It's like, wow, we all grew up together. If they can be that, I can be that. I can gain inspiration from my peers in that way.
Absolutely. Well said. So speaking of celebrating the era and joy, as I mentioned, you have Anniversaries coming up as this episode is airing.
I can't keep up with them. Sometimes I look at my social media and I'm like, oh my God, I missed the anniversary of the Foolish Beat video. And anyway, there's a lot, but right now.
As this is airing, it is the 35th anniversary of the record of Foolish Beat going to #1 and setting the record for the youngest artist. And it's not just youngest female artist. I believe it's just youngest artist ever.
Well, so it was youngest artist at that time. And now it's youngest female. Soulja Boy, Kiss Me Through the Phone. He was also 17 and made that record completely on his own.
Perhaps, hopefully, people listening to this conversation or, looking at your example will want to make that a larger club, even though it's nice to be an exclusive club. I think we'd both like it to be a a bigger club. But
I've been in it long, and it's like I've carried that torch long enough. I'm happy to pass it to all the young girls. And it's really about trusting your creative vision. You know, I said it like I did a post recently where like I'm playing a piano piece I wrote, and I'm like, all writing is like keeping your channel open, hearing something, trusting it, writing it down. Not everything that comes in is great, but it's like you keep doing it and it naturally gets fine-tuned. But there's a lot of trust involved, trusting that your voice is important, and bringing it way back to when we started this conversation. And I said, Phoebe Bridgers said about Taylor Swift receiving the Innovator Award. She heard this girl singing about herself and her life, and like, it was enough. It didn't have to be this like masterminded, socially conscious lyric that was again, crafted by these men in these, towers. It was a girl singing about her life. It's enough.
It's more than enough. So how are you going to celebrate, like I said, 35th anniversary of the record set by Foolish Beat? Next year, that's when Electric Youth will celebrate its 35th. Yes. I'm still hoping that the perfume, the cologne, Electric Youth, will be reissued. You can get it on eBay, but it's going to cost you a lot. And I don't know, I guess if it's sealed, it'll still smell like.
Oh my God, we're like one step closer. Where you would be shocked at how crazy finding your way up the proper food chain at Revlon is. But we've got one step further up the food chain, so we're working on it. Like, listen. If the official reboot doesn't happen, I'm doing my own knockoff. But yeah,
get in the lab, with the perfumery lab and just create it. I'm being serious. I think actually a reissue of the perfume, because you were one of the first pop idols to have your own. Now every pop idol has a line of perfume.
They hand you your perfume deal with your record deal now. And back then it was a very innovative thing to do. Again, like my mom managing me, and it was this very female oriented product. And, and I was in that lab, actually. My mom used to make fun of me because she's like, Deb, in your memory, you were literally like the chemist. But in actuality, they were like, do you like this scent? Do you like this scent? And I gravitated toward the vanillas and the fruits. I was like, I don't like the floral, like grandma's perfume scents. So I wanted to make it smell kind of like young and fruity and fresh. And, I still to this day like candles and anything that smells like a food. Like I want like a coconut cream cake candle in my house. Yeah.
Aside from the cologne reissue that we all want to, we all want to, douse ourselves in Electric Youth in more ways than one. What else do you have coming up to celebrate all the anniversaries? I know there's been some talk about for Electric Youth next year doing some kind of, play the album in its entirety, special shows, events.
Yeah, so we're working on all of that. So here are my dreams. Well, first of all, I'm doing the 80s cruise.
Nice.
So my dream is to be able to do a handful of big shows where I do the album, like recreate the original Electric Youth show. That's the dream, and then maybe like medley up the new stuff for people who have lost track of me for the 3 decades. So that's the goal. We're putting stuff together. I really want to get back to international, but yeah, so we are digging in. We're trying to find, those right scenarios, those right venues. I've waited this long. So when I go back to these places, I want to do it right and with a level of class and integrity, but I want to reach people. So we're trying to put it all together and figure it out. But that is the dream, to do the show.
That's my dream as well, and probably the dream of a lot of people listening or watching right now. I guess
Who loves you dance break.
Oh my God, yeah. Are you going to wear the jean shorts? The jean shorts?
Listen, a little bit like of what Taylor is doing in her Eras tour, maybe do like kind of the modern homage to those costumes. And I have some of the original ones, and I have the blue leather with the light up EY in the back. The battery pack doesn't work anymore. I'm sure we can put new lights in.
So it's been about 1.5 years since The Body Remembers came out. It got a lot of, critical raves. It did very well on the charts. It was very well timed with sort of the disco revival that was happening that year with artists like Miley Cyrus and, of course, Dua Lipa and Kylie Minogue, another sort of teen idol of the 80s who I adore. So that kind of opened the doors. Like I mentioned earlier, that was the first studio album of original material you released in like 2 decades, which is kind of crazy. And I imagine that whetted your appetite to do more? Like, are we going to hear more original music from you soon?
1,000%. I cannot tell you how often I've gone to that piano in the last week.
Awesome.
Because I have been touring so much, and when I'm finally home and the noise gets quieted and I'm puttering and I have to get a little bored, and then the ideas start flooding in. But yeah, and when I was starting the writing for The Body Remembers during the pandemic, I wasn't like constructing an album consciously. I was just writing what was coming to me. And there is a group of songs from that time as well that is definitely a little more of the singer-songwriter genre, the less kind of aggressive dance rock I did on The Body Remembers. And so those have been standing by. I played one of those the other night and I was like, oh, I can't wait for this chapter in this moment too. It's a bit of a more, I don't want to say depthful, because I think The Body Remembers has a lot of depth, but it's a high energy. So this will have a bit more of a, like, put it this way, before I even ever step foot in front of the microphone, I'm going to want to take a month to like calm my nervous system. There's going to be a feeling about it that I want to, there's just a specific feeling I know that I want to elicit from it. But it is more of that melodic singer-songwriter vibe. As I see it now, anything can change, but that's kind of what it's been formulating itself. And so who knows when I'll really record it, but sometime, I guess, in the next year and a half, we'll say.
Well, in the meantime, I do want to advocate that when you put out new music, that you put out that New Edition inspired song, because that was pretty awesome.
Oh my God, Broken Record. And then there's record. In the middle, I go, broken record, broken record, broken record, record machine. Ooh, every day in school, when you walk by, I play it cool. Broken record, machine.
Oh my God.
Yeah. You know what I did on the, I did Out of the Blue shows at 54 Below this past year for the 35th of Out of the Blue. And I pulled a demo for a song called Double Take that it was one that didn't make any of the albums. And I reproduced it and performed it live. And it was a fan favorite. It was so much fun. I have so much music, Lyndsey. It's insane. Like, I look and I go, nobody will ever hear everything I've done. I mean, I feel like I have thousands of songs. I have hundreds of notebooks. I have hundreds of DAT tapes with every one has 20, 25 songs on them. I mean, wow, there's so much music. Yeah. Yes.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing more. And again, to your point that you were making earlier, it's great to see it. You're still in it and excited and, inspired and making new stuff. It has been a very inspiring conversation with you. It always is. I'm so glad.
Thank you. It always is, but this might be my favorite.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know. I don't know. This was the right thing on the right day and the right subject and the right two girls.
Absolutely.
No, it was really, really great. I mean, well, you're such an insightful, music historian, my God, an appreciateur, which is so great.
Oh my God, Debbie, you're going to make me cry.
Oh, no, really. And you wore that piano sweater.
I wore a piano sweater for you. And I didn't even realize when I did it, that Liberace's piano would be in the background for this entire chat. So this chat was historical and historical in more ways than one. So Debbie, I want to thank you. Thank you, Queen of the Teens, Queen of the Scene, for joining me today.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for all the support. I always say it, for all the love and loyalty over 3.5 decades.
Absolutely. And thanks to everybody out there listening. I will catch you next time.
This was Totally 80s, the podcast dedicated to the music of the greatest decade ever. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Totally 80s. And please leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Until our next episode, catch you on the flip side.